Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of Mashing Out with the Beer Fairy on Craft Beer Nation. I'm Ashley Bauer, the Beer Fairy, and I'm here with my friends. We've got Randy Garner Jr., Alan Huerta, and Linda Dean tonight. All of us are homebrewers. And tonight we're going to be talking about the brewing process, both extract brewing and all grain brewing. Before we mash in, I just want to mention that you can find our blog on craftbeernation.org, watch us weekly on our Hangouts on YouTube, listen to our podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, Podcatcher, and FeedBurner, and join us in our Google Plus community on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. Now, let's mash in. So we'll talk about homebrewing and how you do it. I started out as an extract brewer. What are you guys doing right now?
My very first homebrew was, my first two homebrews, I lied earlier, were 1 gallon kits, and they were both extracts. And I guess it was maybe 2 years ago that I went all grain and never looked back. Only thing I use extract for now is to build starters. So, and that's DME. So I'm all
Not a,
grain now, baby.
not a bad thing. Yeah, me too. I was extract for 4 years, and then I went all grain a year and a half ago. What about you, Alan?
I did one Mr. Beer kit, and I don't know what happened because I thought that was the worst beer I ever made. But then I went out, bought How to Brew from John Palmer, and then bought like a Coleman cooler and everything, and just went straight all grain into that afterward. It's kind of a crazy experience.
Jumped
Jumping into
right
the
in.
deep end of the pool.
Yeah. And Linda?
I started out with an entire beer kit and an extract kit from Austin Homebrew, and I have not made the jump to all grain brewing yet. I am still an extract brewer. Every other brew is an experimental brew, and then the other brews are kits, usually from Austin Homebrewer or Northern Brewer or a kit from a local supply store.
Nothing wrong with that. I brewed, like I said, brewed extract 4 years. I pretty much always did kits too. It's just that way you know what you're gonna get. Don't have to. I mean, with extract you have a little bit less room to play around with recipes. So I feel like the people putting the kits together probably knew better than I did and brewed some great beer that way. Um, all
Yeah,
grains a little bit more fun, but a little bit more money to investment wise, kit wise. So I
Yeah,
guess we
but
could start with extract. That'd
not
probably
my
be the best thing.
not my forte, but I'll try to get in where I fit in.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, it's just like you said, extract doesn't have, it doesn't have an enormous room for planning, but you can still experiment with it. My big thing is cost.
Yeah.
Um, uh, using dry extract, uh, using dry malt, usually it's easier to handle and it can be easier to get, but it's more expensive.
Right.
so I don't know if they made it themselves or if they hired another company to do it, but I remember when it was maybe like 3 years ago now, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. But I remember when Northern Brewer they released the rye extract, and that was the first of its kind, which kind of
Yeah.
opened things up for extract brewing anyway.
Yeah. And there's like wheat extract, and there's I think there's one with oats in it now. Even I think maybe I'm not
I
sure.
haven't tried the one with oats. The rye actually goes pretty well.
I bet.
Yeah. Right now I prefer a liquid extract because it's cheaper, but it's awful messy. It is sticky stuff.
Yeah.
But it is hilarious when you get a teenager who has no idea what it is and they think it's like candy caramel.
Eh. Well, I had the pleasure of working at my friend Matt's homebrew store today, Saturday. It's called Hop Yard Brew Supply in Lexington, South Carolina. And I guess the first question I'll ask when somebody walks in the store and they're looking for stuff is extract or all grain. I actually had a gentleman say, "What do you mean?" So there's still, there's people out there who don't know what extract is. I explained it to him as the liquid sugars that people extract from the grain and then condense it down either in dry powder form or in liquid syrupy form. Or so we call it DME for dry malt extract and LME for liquid malt extract. So I know they've come a long way in recent years, like you said, with the rye. But I know when I started doing it, there was a little bit less options, and so you had the base malts, the two row, the I think there was the Pilsner malt, and then they had just the colors, amber and dark. I don't think that you could even get Maris Otter specifically. Do they have that now? Do you know, Linda?
Maris Otter extra. I'm not sure. I don't think so. I
Probably.
haven't seen it. I've seen extra light, light, pale, amber, dark, wheat, and rye.
I've seen Munich too. That's
Munich,
kind of
yes,
amazing.
Munich, yes.
Yeah.
I've
So
actually seen two types of wheat, but one is a far more difficult to get than the other. It's a
yeah.
specific German type of wheat extract.
So with the dry, one of the things I remember is do not let any moisture get in that bag.
Hmm.
Turns to a brick.
No, if you're using dry, you have to keep it absolutely bone dry until you're ready to add it. You open up the whole bag and dump it as quickly as possible, because if you can't get it out of the bag in one go, you're dead. You don't
Yeah,
have enough. You don't have
I,
enough to finish the recipe.
I save some for when I do starters.
yeah, that's what I was gonna like when I'm doing my starters. Like, I used to keep it in the original bag, but I learned to start putting it in Ziploc bags because
Yeah.
like I would pour it from the original bag into like my Erlenmeyer flask or whatnot, and then it just the
The
steam gets
steam.
in there and it gets all hot and stuck, and I'm like,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I have.
you portion it off now.
yeah, I do. I didn't used to do like it took me a few, maybe like 2 or 3 times before I was like, okay, this sucks.
Right. And then
I do have to admit that using extract, you can't really calculate the efficiency as well, but it's really nice if you don't want to do calculations.
that's true. Yeah, I mean a lot of the math's already done for you just because you've got the sugars that you've got from what the brewer extracted the malt.
I've never calculated my efficiency.
Really, never. I tried with my extract, and it turned out into this big, uncalculable mess. I couldn't figure out anything. So
I, I don't
eventually, I'm
know.
going to have to go all grain because I like the math.
Yeah, there's
Not gonna lie, like I used to every single batch measure everything, but for a while now, like I'll measure every batch every so often. Can't really give you a number, but it's just like I'll brew, won't measure my pre-boil, won't measure my post-boil. Just put it in, throw it out, pitch the yeast, and let it go. But
I mean, I guess measuring efficiency, that's part of the process, right? So,
mhm.
I mean, how do you measure efficiency? I've never done it probably because I don't know how to do it. So, or I'm not saying I don't know how. I just don't know what it entails. I can do
well,
anything.
maybe we should finish up the extract stuff and then go to the
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think it's a little bit more applicable to the all grain stuff.
Okay,
So
It is
perfect.
far more applicable to
yeah.
all grain.
Yeah, so we were talking about the dry, we were talking about the liquid. Um so what I would do if I recall, and it's been a couple years, but I would get the water heated up to a fair amount of temperature, what like 150, 160. I wouldn't boil the water before I added the extract.
It depends on whether you want a drier beer or a sweeter beer. If you want a drier beer, you heat it up a little hotter. Up to 165 is like the max I would ever put my grain in, and
Well, not the
150 on
grain,
the.
the sugar, like the actual syrup or the dry. When you're adding that to the water, say you don't have any grain at
Oh,
all.
that? No, I boil.
Yeah.
It's at a
So
boil
you
when I add my malt.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm fairly certain I never got it to boil, but it has been a while, so
yeah. I soak my grain first, and then I soak my grain first at 152 to 165 wherever I want it, and then after the grain is finished soaking, I bring it to a boil, turn it off, add all my fermentable malt extracts, any sugars, anything that's going to actually ferment gets tossed in at that time. bring it back to a boil, and start boiling the wort.
So
Right.
you're doing like a partial mash type rather than
Yeah,
a
that was what I
full-on
was going to go into
extract.
next was partial
Or
mash.
it could have been. It could be specialty grain though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's partial mash, specialty
Yeah.
grain.
Okay.
Okay, see, there's where it gets confusing because I've always had it described to me as extract brewing.
No, extract in and of itself is just the extract, and you can
Just
brew
the
a
extract.
decent beer like that. You really can.
Mhm.
Then the steeping grain, not necessarily getting any sugars from it, but getting color and flavor. And then partial mash, you do actually get some sugars from it. So that's
Mhm.
to me the difference.
So, I think where the stigma comes in about extract brewing is a lot of people when they start brewing, which they don't know anything about the process or anything about, like, I mean, whatever they read, but about sanitation or whatever. But a lot of them will start extract and make those really bad beers, and then when they learn, they'll move on. They'll go like partial mash and they'll move to all grain. And it's not really
Right.
that the extract's making bad beers, just that
No.
they didn't know what they were doing when they first started. Which when I started all grain, my first 6, 7, 8 all grain beers were horrible before they started being like drinkable. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like the same thing. Just it's people just giving extract a bad name versus not knowing what they're doing.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can make medal winning beer from extract, right?
You sure can.
Yeah,
There's a
you
guy in
can.
my club. That's all he's ever brewed is extract, and he's won probably at least 30 awards. I mean, he's been brewing a
Wow.
while. Yeah, like 15 years or something like that.
I mean, I can't. I've had a few, like the Cooper's kits. Now, the Mr. Beer actually didn't taste too bad to me. I had a friend who actually did a batch of that, and it actually didn't taste too bad. It wasn't my typical style, but it wasn't bad. Cooper's, however, it was ugly. I didn't like it at all.
Could it have been old?
It's possible.
That's one of my theories is people say they've got bad extract. I'm like, well, how old was it? And it's been
It's
sitting on the
possible.
shelf a
I mean,
while, so it's going to be good.
the person who made it, kept a bunch of cans on hand, so it's very possible it was old.
So how old is old when it comes to extract? Like, what's the shelf? What's an acceptable shelf time? Like 2 months?
I'm not sure. I've brewed with some that's a year old, and I could taste the difference.
Okay.
So, yeah,
I
like,
wouldn't store anything more than 6 months.
right, 6 months
Yeah.
is probably pushing it.
I was gonna put about the 6 month mark. If it's stored really well, I would say maybe a year, but then I would think then you definitely start tasting off from what is intended.
Yeah,
But like if it's stored really horribly, like really hot in like I mean, extract should be in a closed environment, but if it's really humid or in a really hot place, a couple months it'll definitely go bad. But if you store it well, just like with grain, it should last a decent amount of time.
right. And I did learn while working at the shop this past weekend, a fellow needed some Munich extract for his recipe. If you open up and you don't need the full amount of the liquid, you can actually put it in your fridge or you can even freeze it, apparently, for 6 to 8 weeks.
Hmm.
That's
Does
interesting.
extract freeze? I did not know.
Apparently, that's what
Okay.
the article said.
Well, I guess it's
I
not
haven't
alcoholic
tried
yet,
it.
so yeah, I guess it would freeze.
Yeah, but you can either put it in your fridge or freeze it just in the original container with the lid sealed. So that's good to know.
The more you know.
Yeah.
These are stars.
So if you were doing purely extract, you do a 60-minute boil starting when you got the extract all in and mixed in and the boil started. You would add your hops as the schedule says. Most people use hop pellets at the extract level. Cool it down.
But you could still use flavorings and such, at the end of your boil.
Sure, yeah. Just a very, very basic if you're just starting out. And then the cooling process. We can go into that with the all grain too, though, because it applies there.
Yeah.
So then you were talking about partial mash, where you have the grains, or steeping grains, where it's not necessarily getting sugars, but it's getting flavor and color. And that's generally about the same as what somebody doing all grain would do, just on a much smaller level, probably mashing 152, 154.
I definitely do it for head retention too. So
Mm-hmm.
some nice wheat or flake barley for head retention is always nice. And
Yeah,
then
definitely.
But yeah, it's real basic. I put it all in a bag and steep it for maybe 25 minutes and take it out and then start my start my water up to a boil.
Right. One thing I remember not knowing when I first did it is you're not supposed to like squeeze the bag, squeeze the grains, or anything like that because you're gonna put tannins in your beer.
Tannins. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the very first one I did, I trying to
yeah,
get everything out. It wasn't bad, but it was eh, you know. Uh,
exactly.
Yeah. My first batch wasn't bad, but it was not enjoyable. And like I didn't squeeze it, but I definitely had the bag and used a spoon and was mashing the hell out of it. You know what I'm saying? Trying to
Yeah,
get a little
yeah.
more out of it. So
right.
I don't know. Maybe that's why it wasn't enjoyable because maybe I squeezed a little too much tannins out of there.
Yeah. It's something I think that seems so obvious to do and yet don't do
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Um,
Now I just lay the spoon on top of the pot and I let the grain bag sit on top until it's almost drained and then just lift it off to a bowl.
yeah. So I think just to sum it up, the best thing with extract is to make sure you have good fresh extract and then just follow the rules of brewing like you would all grain, anything else. Sanitation, cleaning,
Hmm.
temperature, fermentation, all that stuff. They apply for both methods. So
Well,
um,
let's move on to all grain because this
yeah,
this this interests me to be able to learn more about it.
yeah. So let's say you've been doing extract for a while and you want to move into all grain. That's what I did a year and a half ago now, and it's been going great. I used my old extract kettle as a hot liquor tank. Um, that's the word for another kettle to create your hot water to use for various parts of brewing. I have a new kettle now that I use and a burner, a really nice burner, so I do all my brewing outside now. I think most people who do all grain, because you do a full boil versus a smaller boil with the extract, do it outside.
It would save you a lot of grief from your spouse if you brewed outside.
Yeah,
In
Let's
case you
say,
ever in case you ever boil over.
right.
let's say one of my.
Unless you have a huge kitchen like I do.
Mm,
That's not
I
really
have a
it.
really large kitchen and a extremely powerful stove.
Yeah, you can do it. I mean, it's not impossible. It's just, I think most all of us do it outside
I
now.
yep.
destroyed my stove with my first couple all grain batches,
Yeah, that
like full boil, just everywhere. But
Yeah,
that ain't no fun to clean up.
no.
So yeah, so but yeah, actually, all grain, it's a little bit of an investment at first, right?
Yeah, you gotta
And then
have that mash tun, which
yeah,
there's many ways to fashion one. I have a nice round cooler
me
with
too.
mine and a false bottom.
Now,
I don't have.
how many gallons is your cooler?
I have a 10-gallon one.
I have a 10-gallon cooler as well.
I mean, I have a cooler that's like rectangular. I don't know if
People
that's
use those. People
All day.
people use
that's
those,
what I
yeah.
used to use. A Coleman. It was like 13 point something gallon Coleman cooler.
Hmm.
I think that's probably the one I have.
Okay.
Red. That
Yeah.
keeps the heat in longer.
Yes.
I I don't have a false bottom on mine though. I have a bazooka screen.
I think a
I mean,
lot of people do that.
That's what I used to use too.
yeah. I've been thinking about buying a false bottom, but I'm like, why?
It's really classy.
That nobody once that mash tun is full of grain, it doesn't matter what it look like at the bottom.
Well, I didn't move to the false bottom until I moved to a kegel for my cooler because other than I mean, like I had this rectangular cooler, so I guess for me it wouldn't have made sense anyway. But now
No,
to have the kegel, the full round, it makes sense to have the false bottom sitting on the bottom.
right.
Has it made that much of a difference?
Um, well, I can't really answer that because from my previous system to my current system, like
Two
it's
differences.
yeah,
Gotcha.
like I'm sure if I was using one of those Gatorade coolers with a false bottom versus a like a
Bazooka.
bazooka screen because I was using bazooka screen before, and in my rectangular one, the bazooka screen was awesome, but you know, I don't know about the for a circular.
I suspect that some people would argue it changes your efficiency, possibly in a good way. But
Or having a false bottom.
yeah, but I mean, I've always had the false bottom, so I don't know.
So I feel kind of silly. I don't know what a bazooka screen is.
Hey there, that's actually a good thing. This is why we're doing this podcast. So, you want to explain the bazooka screen since you have one, Randy?
Um, Imagine a tube made out of really stiff screen that's closed on one end and screws into a valve on the other end. There's your bazooka screen.
Okay,
So get like
where do you put that?
In your mouth.
inside your mash tun. It goes.
Okay.
So like on those circular coolers, you know how it has a thing to squeeze for the drink to come out.
Yes.
You take that out and throw it away because you're never gonna need it again. And then you put a valve in its place. And so the valve is on the outside, and on the inside of the cooler is this bazooka screen.
Oh, I get it. Okay, and that prevents the grain from clogging up the.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't remember what kind of plumbing it is, but when I first started, I bought it, went to the hardware store and bought this plumbing. I had to cut like the tube out of the middle so I could like just tie off the thing at the same end to do the same thing. Tie off the mesh wire at the end. But I can't remember what that's called, but that's what a whole bunch of brewers start with.
What?
Let me find it. I'll find a name.
Yeah, find a name for it.
It's this thing, and it connects this other thing,
That's
and they
You know
go
what?
together.
Sometimes I say things and I don't think about what I'm saying, but I know what I'm talking about.
It's in your head, but we need it to come out of your head so we can see it.
So my false bottom, while you're looking that up, is it's a nice professionally made one. The little wire, but not really wire. I mean, it's a flat piece of metal. It's got all the holes in it, like a screen, I guess, and it's got
Perforated.
just to fit the bottom, and then it has just a little bit of a lip up so that the liquid can get under it, but all the grain stays on top, and connects to a tube that is replacement of the spigot that Randy was talking about. It's fantastic. A little
So,
pricey at first, but I think I spent like $50 on it.
so having a mash tun and actually literally mashing in and extracting wort and everything and lautering is I just made it seem like it wasn't much, but it sounded like a lot.
It
But
sounds like a lot, but it's
th
not.
right, it's not at all. That step in the process is the main difference between extract brewing and all grain brewing, right?
Right.
And
Well, in that the difference is in the first part you're actually creating the malt, right?
Yeah, the wort, the
the
Yeah.
liquid,
wort.
the sugar water.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
so what grains are you putting in there?
So
What?
they usually start with a base grain, be it two row,
Ma-
Pilsner,
Maris Otter.
Maris Otter, and then you'll have specialty grains, Munich, Crystal, Cara, all the grains you use for your specialty grains.
Okay.
It's usually 80-ish% of your base, and then 15 to 20 of maybe wheat or oats or whatever to make up the full amount. And you mash in it, depending on the recipe, 152, 154, 156, maybe 150. I've got my bitter recipe. I think I mash in at 150.
So
So
like for somebody coming from extract brewing, if you went into all grain and read up on malts, like it's like a whole new world. I mean, there are so many different kinds of malts out there that can give you so many different results and serve so many different purposes. So, like, Linda, to your question is like, what kind of grains are you putting in there? Well, I mean, that all depends on the style of beer that you're brewing. It
mhm.
depends on the result that you're trying to get. You got some grains like I think a carapils or some of the other grains in that same family that are good for things such as like head retention, whereas caramel 120 is going to give you one thing, caramel 80, 60, 40, they're all going to give you different things, but they're kind of in the same family. So there's a whole litany of things that can be done with different types of grains.
Right.
So it just depends on what the end result you're trying to achieve.
Yep, just a lot more customization.
Yeah. So when you extract brew, um, like you make your wort by boiling the water in the extract.
Yes.
When you're going all grain, you make your wort by steeping the grain in water for a specified period of time,
At a
extracting
specific temperature.
at a
Right.
specific temperature,
Yeah.
getting that grain off. I mean, I'm sorry, getting that wort off of the grain, right? And then putting more water on top of that grain to extract any residual sugars that may be still hanging out in the grain. And then when
Oh,
you
okay.
and then when you get that liquid off, that's when that's bat sparging, right? Or
Yeah, you can either do fly or batch. And
yeah, fly sparging is when they have like essentially what it's a constant trickle of water that's going on your grain as you're draining it off. So you kind of want the outflow to equal the inflow,
right.
so
Mhm.
that you can and once you get to your desired level of wort or the desired volume of wort, then you can kill it, and that's when you start your boil.
How about loudering? What does loudering mean?
The, essentially
The
washing
rinsing of
the
grains.
yeah.
Right.
So you
Oh,
remember I
okay.
spoke about putting in that extra water to get more
Yes.
sugar? That's lautering.
Okay. All right. Now I got it straight.
Yeah, and then the term mashing out falls in there too, the name of the show.
Yeah.
Same
And then
thing.
also, so when you're extracting that wort off of the grain, there's a process you have to do called a Vorloff, which is essentially when you first start getting the liquid off of the grain, there are going to be little bits of grain that get through that bazooka screen or get through your false bottom. So what you want to do is you kind of want to collect that first in a separate pitcher and pour it back on top. Because
Yeah.
eventually what's going to happen is your grain bed is going to get like really set. And when your grain bed sets on your bazooka string or your false bottom, then you're going to stop getting chunks of grain that come through in your wort. And then you can start collecting clear wort. You want your wort to be as clear as possible. It's to save you some clarity issues on the back end.
Exactly. Yeah, I usually have to go 8 or 10 times to get mine to settle out properly.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I'm like, golly, still?
But yeah, I mean, to sum it up, you have your hot liquor tank. You use that water to mash in by soaking it's usually like what, 1.5 quarts per pound of, I'm not saying that right.
It
If,
is.
it-
You're
if,
saying that right.
Yeah, I am 1.5 quarts per pound of grain or 1.25 quarts per pound of grain. And you just let it soak for an hour mashing in, then drain it off or drain it while you're putting that second round of water. And you usually mash out at 170 to stop the enzyme activity in the grain, although that's mostly done by then anyway.
Actually, Alan, when you guys sparge, do you stir the grain bed up all over again?
I don't.
I Yeah, I fly sparge, so I don't. But back when I
Okay.
used to bat sparge, I would.
Right, yeah, that would be the difference. Got fly sparge too now.
I better step my game up.
No, that's okay. Batch sparging is fine. It's all
But
in
I don't.
personal preference.
My setup is well, I guess you can make any setup gravity dependent. I mean, you just need a couple boxes or stools or whatever. But I'd have to get another cooler as a HLT because my current HLT pot doesn't have a valve on it.
Yeah, mine doesn't
So
either.
if I'm so how do you fly sparge?
I have a pitcher and I pitcher
Oh.
in and I go over here and I pour
Your
and I
brew day is
pitcher and I pour
very
and
intensive.
yeah, yeah, it's a very personal process. Yeah,
Okay.
it works. So
I guess there are advantages for each type.
yeah, efficiency. Some people say one's more efficient than the other.
Honestly, I think the thing is when you go all green, you feel like you are more hands-on in the process. You feel like it's more like you crafted it more, right? So it's
Right.
just it's all
Well, you've
perspective.
definitely got your finger in the pie more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's all perspective, man.
It's like somebody delivers me the pie crust, but I have to make the filling.
Right. There you
You
go.
know.
Yeah.
but I want to make the pie crust too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a little bit more financial investment in the equipment, but actually you save a little bit of money on the ingredients. So,
Because grain
That's
is
true.
you
That's
can
true. I learned that even the all grain kits are less expensive
mhm.
than the extract kits.
And I like to use Maris Otter. That's just my favorite base grain. So I'll buy a 55-pound bag of that, and then all I have to go buy is hops and yeast and whatever other malts I want to throw in. It saves money that way too. So I guess we should talk about brewing in general now that we've kind of gone through the different, because regardless, either way, you're going to be doing it this way once you get to this portion of the brewing. Usually recipes 60-minute to 90-minute boil. I've always been a 60-minute boil kind of girl. Some
me
people do
too.
75,
I do
I do
90.
90. Yeah, I mean it. I think what is
Alan,
the advantage?
why do you choose 90 for your?
Yeah, what's the
So
advantage?
the first reason I started going from 60 to 90 is because I wanted to get a really good boil going before I like do my first hop edition, and then after time I started. It was just a lot of reading and a lot of stuff like that, but um, I mean, I guess like the reading I did didn't really decide it for me, but I made the personal choice. So I guess I got to come up with better reasons personally, but it's for me and my system, it works out the best.
Now,
So,
did you have to increase your volume of work to go 90 minutes?
um, slightly, not as much as you would think, because it's like you would have to, yes, to hit your numbers based on whatever you're pulling into your program. But it wasn't as big as a jump as I was expecting. Maybe like once I hit the 2 hour point, it would seem like more, but I usually start with about like 8 gallons at most before I start my boil. Usually doing like a 5.5 or 6 gallon batch and get down to my numbers, no problem.
So speaking of hitting your numbers, like if you let's say you're not hitting your numbers, right? Your gravity is a little lower than it was supposed to be, but you're at the end of your boil.
Hmm.
Um, can you do you just? Well, I guess you have two options. You can either boil longer to concentrate your wort a little more, or you can throw some light DME in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
And if you
option
boil longer, though, you're going to mess with your hops because you probably had a hop schedule that was 60
Right.
minutes or whatever, and
the
those are
option I choose in that situation is to go with the longer boil, but like Ashley was saying, it depends on your hop profile because if you're throwing a lot of hops in there for flavor, let's say you use the kind of like the latest mode, which I would say is around 30, and then you boil it for another 15, it's all the volatiles from there kind of just are gone.
right.
You know,
Now, see,
very essential.
there's what because Dogfish Head does their 60-minute, and their 90-minute and their 120-minute. So I always that does say how long their boil is, right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's
Yeah.
continuously hop too. They have that special thing going where it just
It
puts
has a
little
name. I
hops
can't
into it the
remember it
whole
though.
time.
You know how he started that?
I don't
No.
remember. I think I've heard it, but
You remember a long time ago they had those football games where you put all the guys on the field and the machine and the thing vibrates and the football players just kind of go down the field vibrating bumping into each other. He
yeah,
started with one of those and put it tilted it at an angle and loaded it up with hops, so it just like vibrated hops into the boil the whole time,
that's awesome.
That's
continuously
cool.
hopped.
I love that.
So okay, so Alan, you said that you would rather just go with the longer boil, but is there something wrong with adding some DME to it, some light
Uh,
DME?
Nothing at all. Just
Yeah,
you have to do the calculation.
Yeah,
right.
Like
I
however
mean,
many points you're low, you have to do that calculation and then
but that would be the
add it
safest
in.
bet to not influence the your hop schedule.
That's true.
Yeah,
Because
or
it
you could celebrate and say, "Yay, lower alcohol beer." Wait, that's me.
Yeah, but you know what? If you mess with the malts, you got to be careful, especially as an extract, because you can really screw it up. I did a watermelon extract beer, and I decided after adding, I did a 1 gallon recipe, and I decided after adding the 1 gallon of liquid, I just happen to have a 1 pound bag of wheat. And I tossed that in too. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that that 1 gallon is now going to come out to 9.25%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to have a really hot watermelon beer. That's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's getting. You had to know your calculations before you just go
Exactly.
ahead and do that. You can't just throw in a pound for.
Yes. For shits and giggles, just
Yeah.
no, be careful.
Yeah.
If you're way off your numbers and you celebrate lower ABV beer, you'd be like, I have this Session Imperial Stout.
Is that a thing?
A
It could
session
be.
imperial.
be.
No, no. Well, I
Maybe
guess for
that
somebody
might be
who
cool.
doesn't have a liver anymore.
Or my personal problem is when I end up with a higher gravity than I wanted.
Oh, that's never a problem.
Never a problem for me. That's reason to celebrate.
No, I have gone back and added a little bit of water to it, but they say that's not the best thing to do because apparently it changes the flavor. I don't know. I still like the beer.
I think
That's
it's
what
not
extract does.
that big of an issue,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Well, yeah, in extract, I do that all the time. If my boil
Right.
gets too low, I just add a little bit of water.
Exactly. I mean, obviously you don't want to just add any water. You want to make sure it's sanitized water if you're done with the
Well,
boil.
if it's longer, if it's still longer than 20 minutes, adding tap water is okay.
Oh yeah,
Anywhere
but
from 20 minutes to 0 minutes, you really should use distilled water.
right. No, mine is generally when it's in the bucket, chilled down and ready to go. That's when I realize, oh, I don't have enough, and so then I go and I add the distilled water or whatever that maybe previously boiled water that I know is okay to add, something like
Yeah,
that.
now see, in extract brewing, the second I pour my wort, I always have to top it up to 5 gallons. I hardly ever hit that 5 gallon mark.
Right. Yeah, it's normal to do a partial boil in extract too. So yeah, I've
So
done
can,
that.
can we talk about calculating efficiency?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
I don't ever calculate it, so.
Alan has. So Alan, how do you
I
do
have.
this?
Well, it's like if you're trying to get your whole brew house efficiency or whatever, you have to be very kind of like anal about it because you need to know how much water went into your system, like how much water came out of your system, your pre-boil, or like even if you're doing efficiency for your whole system, you gotta know your first runnings, your second runnings, your pre-boil, and your post-boil, and
Right.
also your finishing gravity for the beer.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like
I don't care that much.
a million different measurements.
Is there any time in all grain brewing where you really wouldn't have to worry about that? Where
Is if
somebody
you,
who's just not good with numbers.
yeah, just if you, I would say like at least get your post boil number and your like I would say at least that and your pre boil and your master efficiency from that.
Right.
But like honestly, like I said earlier, I used to take a lot of readings and now I just brew. My beer comes out good and like I have a good idea of the alcohol in it, so it's just like I'm not brewing for like if I brewing commercially, I'm sure it'd be a different thing, but I'm brewing for me, you, whoever, like you know what I mean? It's not like or even if I send to a competition, they're not gonna be calculating everything. You know what I mean? It's just here's my beer, taste it, drink it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the main reason why I ask about the brew house efficiency is because a lot of times, if you go to Beersmith or even if you go to Brew Toad or Brewer's Friend or whatever, when you're crafting your recipes, they ask you what is well, one of the fields is your efficiency. I typically just go with whatever's in there by default. If there's nothing
Yeah.
there, I'll just put 75% in there because that's what was there last time. So
Right.
That's a typical number. Like a lot of people just in like in your situation, like you said, we're just throwing something in. They'll throw it in from like 65 to 85, and I think BYO, like if you open their magazine at the beginning, they say they calculate for. I wouldn't say it's 65. I'd had to open up the magazine and look, but that's what all the recipes are based at. So if you're gonna take a recipe out of there, you have to adjust if you care enough to hit your master efficiency, or just go with their recipe and get what you get.
Right.
yeah,
Have higher efficiency. You're just gonna have higher ABV.
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I generally only check my gravity when I'm done, when it's chilled down, and then I check my gravity when it's done fermenting and figure out my ABV, and that's honestly the only numbers I care about. But
Yeah,
it's not that the others aren't important; they're important depending on what you're going for, really.
yeah. I never check like pre-boil gravity. Never, ever.
I check it every now and then, but I less care about, it, like I said.
Right.
Yeah, the only two numbers I've ever been worried about are when it's in the bucket, ready to get the yeast in it, and then after it's done fermenting. That's it.
Yeah, that's what Ashley said too. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what I do too. So
And in case anybody listening or watching doesn't know gravity, the sugar in the water, I mean, it's a way to measure the amount of sugar dissolved in the water. Basic water gravity is 1, so any additional sugar is going to have a higher number. We use specific gravity here in America. It comes from the British way of brewing, but the most professionally brewers use Plano. So
yeah, and or yeah, bricks, right?
bricks, yeah, that's another way of. But I've got one that has bricks. My spectrometer. Is
Mm-hmm.
that what it is? Words are
Mm-hmm.
hard. And so it has bricks on it, and then I have to go to the internet and
No, a
Refractometer.
refractometer.
Spectrometer.
there you go.
I
Whew.
said words are hard.
I was
Um,
struggling just now, man.
yeah, it's been a week. Is it Tuesday? Yeah, I don't know. So,
You haven't had enough beer yet, obviously.
clearly, yeah. But yeah, it's bricks, and so I just go to the internet and put in the number, and then it spits out the specific gravity, because that's how my brain has been trained to think in the gravity department, and it's pretty cool. Um,
Yeah, I use the same little gravity thermometer that came with the kit. It's been good. I haven't broken it yet.
God, I've broken like 5 of those things.
It's been like almost 3 years, I think, and it hasn't broken yet.
Nice. Well, we should talk about chilling because that's a very important part of brewing, regardless of what method you use, and gotta do it. So I have a immersion chiller. That's kind of like the next step up above just taking your kettle and putting it nice, which can be kind of difficult once you get to the 5 gallon, full boil.
I've done it, but it takes a lot longer than I'd really like for that beer to come down.
Yeah,
And you
it's
hate yourself in this middle of the night.
Yes. You start at 7 o'clock in the evening, 12 o'clock. You're going, oh my God,
want it to be
just want to go
over.
to bed.
Yeah,
I made my own immersion chiller. I bought
yeah.
some copper from Home Depot. Um, got my fermenter, wrapped the copper around the fermenter, used some clamps, some hose, some clamps. But when I chill, I used my immersion chiller, and also I have like a big Tupperware container. So I use the immersion chiller, and I put my kettle in a bucket of ice water.
Okay. I have a
So
have a double immersion chiller, as in I have one end immersed in an ice bath when it's in the summer, and then that end feeds the one that goes into uh, the wort, or the wort at that point still. So it goes from a hose to the ice bath and then to the kettle.
cool.
Yeah, our water is almost freezing when it comes out of the tap anyway. So
Yeah,
I just
not
use
so.
an immersion chiller for my 5 gallon batches, and my 1 gallon batches go in an ice bath because
Yeah.
I need to make another immersion chiller for my 1 gallons, and I just haven't found that that's useful.
No, probably not.
Virginia in the summertime, and much like South Carolina in the summertime, it's hard to get that temperature down, man.
Oh yeah.
It's hard.
85-degree tap water is not unheard of.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
when isn't there a way a home brewer can do a whirlpool?
I think so.
Like, I mean, is it literally just stirring
Well,
your wort as it's chilling?
Well, yeah, but you won't want to do the hot side aeration because that would probably be bad. I
Do,
mean,
do the what?
hot side aeration.
Oh, okay.
do you
Ah,
mean to aerate your beer while it's hot?
Yeah, yeah, you don't want to do that in that part of it. You'll get off flavors.
So you
So,
want to wait until it's cool.
Yeah.
so there's kind of like the way you were saying, Randy, where you just, once your boil's done, you sit there and stir it. But and that's kind of like the, let's say, poor man's method, if you will. But they also sell counterflow chillers that will actually go through the outport. People usually run it through a pump and back in through a counterflow chiller.
Hmm.
And then when it comes out of that whole system, it'll be spinning itself. So it's kind of like a low impact flow system, if you will. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
it's supposed to avoid the like a lot of splashing and everything like that.
Gotcha.
And the way I do it, I'm running through a counterflow tube, but it's through a plate chiller. But I will submerge my hose coming out of the plate chiller into the wort, and then I will, I'll give it a swirl initially and let it go, and then by that time too, I'm also using a second pump to push ice water because the hose water is not gonna be cold enough. But I'll fill the bucket with ice, fill it with water, and flush it that way and recirculate it inside my kettle before I get it going to inside my fermenter. That's what I would say.
Gotcha.
I am all about the poor man's method. I stir it gently while it's still up above 90 degrees. Once it drops below 90 degrees, I stir a little harder until it's down to 75, and then it really gets aerated.
Right, and that's when you need aeration. That and once it gets cold enough, it's
Yeah.
okay. It's just on the
Hmm.
hot side, it can be bad. But you gotta do the aeration, which is again something you have to do regardless of extract or all grain. I think we spoke a little bit about that in the last episode.
Yep. We
With
just shake the
how,
carboy.
right, that'll get you to your 8 parts per million or so that is necessary for the yeast health. With good shaking, or you can use an oxygen stone, which is nice. Um, and we spoke a little bit about yeast in the previous episode, but just as a quick reminder, you've got your dry yeast, you've got your liquid yeast. If you did a liquid yeast, you probably wanted to do a starter. And once you get
Actually, the
your
white the white labs, just the white labs right out of the tube has always worked for me. I've never had to use a starter.
wow, what is it like? What gravity though? Because generally it's like it's made for 1040 supposedly.
Oh, well, I mean, bear in mind that I'm an extract brewer, so I'm probably not going to have the same gravity you guys have.
No, it
It's
shouldn't matter. You can do high grav with extract.
well, high gravity, yes, but I've never had just if I have a tube of White Labs yeast, it's never mattered to me if now the temperature has mattered. I have to let it sit out for at least 2 hours, maximum like 22 hours before I put it in. But if I put it in, I've never had to make a starter, and it's always fermented.
Hmm.
Oh, I can't hear Ashley anymore.
Yeah, so your mic went out.
Good now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about in the last episode the yeast people basically say that their tubes and their smack packs and the dry yeast is good at 1040. And anything over that, I mean, it may ferment, but you could potentially get off flavors. So if like you did a I don't know 1080, 1090 with just one tube, the yeast have to work a lot harder to get to where they need to be to ferment that. And so that's why, yeah, it'll ferment, but it's not necessarily the best thing. Um, but like almost all of my beers are 1040-ish range, so I haven't done any starters either, and haven't had any problems. But I also use a lot of dry yeast too. It's nice. But yeah, I mean you can do it. I think Vicky did her first batch, and she didn't know about that, and didn't. It was like a pretty high, like 1 point. Was it 1.1 or something? And she just did
Oh,
one vial of White Labs.
were you talking about the girls? Wait.
It was one she brewed at home with somebody, maybe Sarah. And
Okay.
we were all in a conversation about it, and we're like, oh no, you only did one, and I can't remember. It's been a
I do
while.
actually remember that. I don't
Yeah.
remember the beer, but I do
Oh
remember that
yeah,
conversation.
me too. Me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you find it's not actually fermenting or not fermenting vigorously, is it okay to just throw another tube in there the next day?
Sure. I've had to do that before. It could at that point already have created all flavors, but I mean, better to go ahead and make it happen, and it could still be really good. I mean, it's not gonna.
Well,
Well, I
by
mean,
then you've done all about everything else you possibly could. I mean, you can't
right.
prevent the off flavors then. You may as well just go ahead and,
Exactly. Yeah, I've had to do that with a batch before. I had some really, really slow yeast on it was a 1060 stout when I was still doing extract, and I went to the homebrew shop the next day and bought another pack of yeast, and it went, and it tasted fine. It was drinkable anyway. Well,
Sometimes
I
they
guess probably ought
go
to wrap
ahead.
this up here soon. It has been fun though,
very
Hey,
fun.
hey, we
Very
talked.
informative.
We spoke about beer, so that's always fun.
right? Any questions, comments, ideas, concerns?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Cool. Well, it was lovely hanging out with you all tonight, and hopefully we had a good time, learned some stuff about the process of brewing beer. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in either the community in the event or on the YouTube. Um,
You can even tweet them. Hashtag
yeah,
mashing out.
hashtag mashing out. Yes, you can Twitter them on the Twitters. So. Anyway, it's been lovely, and have a good night, and catch us on one of our other hangouts or craftbeernation.org.